We have got a hell of a title fight. Max Holloway is taking on the #1 contender Alex Volkanovski. You can get Holloway at -175, Volkanovski 145. And in my opinion, as much as we've loved Max Holloway's title reign so far, you look at some of the people he's beaten, Aldo, Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar, this for me is his biggest test so far. Because Volkanovski is a fantastic all-rounder.
Yeah, and I think it's about time. I think Volkanovski has proved what he's got, and he can prove he can kind of stick around with some of the better fighters. From Max Holloway kind of point of view, sometimes you get those fights where it's like, I'm gonna have to put in the extra work now. I'm gonna have to put in those extra mile runs or whatever. I think this could be one of those fights. I think fighting, he has fought maybe some people who I don't want to say have lost it, but maybe not been at the top of their game. I think this is someone who's kind of at his peak, and he'll have to kind of put in a good performance.
Do you think this should have headlined? Because I think there was a lot of people out there, and I include myself in that, who looked at the 3 title fights and thought, this has more intrigue about it.
It's the wrong order for me. You need to flip the other two.
Yes.
I agree. This is the fight that I'm most interested. You're on about flicking off at the core main event. If this was the main event, you definitely wouldn't have flicked off at the core main event.
Yeah.
You'd definitely followed on and watched this.
Do you think maybe part of the reason for that is that you could maybe argue Max's stock isn't what it was, say, last year?
Yeah.
I mean, he beat Ortega, and that was a hell of a performance to do that. But since then, he had the fight against Dustin Poirier, which he lost. Didn't really look all that dominant against Frankie Edgar. It was a pretty dull fight, to be honest. And maybe this UFC's way of saying, hey, you don't really deserve to headline a 3-card pay-per-view. I
mean, I actually think it's maybe not that deep into it. I think it's the fact that, like we were saying before about people who talk, I think Colby and Usman have had this beef, and they've had this negativity towards each other. I think that's what the UFC now seems to be kind of basing the fights off. That's what, for them, that's what sells.
I think Corby, the whole Donald Trump atmosphere, the whole kind of thing, and you hate him to love him, American great kind of thing, I think that sells, and I think that's what they're going to totally agree.
Yeah. And however much the Max Holloway fight could be by far the better fight.
Oh, it's definitely the better fight.
It's
business, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And we'll talk about Max in a bit more detail. 21-4 record, a fantastic volume striker, and some of the best cardio in the division.
And I think it's tough to kind of keep up with that.
Yes. And we've seen fighters try to.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that sticks in my mind is Jose Aldo. I mean, Aldo was keeping him honest in those first 2 rounds. But then Max just kept the pace up, and you could see Aldo was just trying to keep up, trying to connect with these punches, and was just getting picked off. It was actually quite sad to watch him, just desperately clinging on, trying to get to the end of the round. And we saw the same thing with Brian Ortega. Ortega kept him honest as well until Max turned it on.
And that's what I mean. In the Ortega one, I think when we discussed it, I leant towards Max, but I was saying how easy Brian Ortega could get that. He could be the guy who kind of stepped in and dethroned him, but it was just...
That was a good fight.
Such a good performance from Holloway. And I don't think Ortega did any harm. I think he didn't not doing himself any favours. He put in a performance. He did try his best, but I just think Holloway was such a dominant performance.
I was so relieved they stopped that fight.
Yeah.
I mean, the state of Brian's face at the end of the 4th round.
I know. And could you have predicted that beforehand?
Dr. Stoppage, no.
I didn't think that much damage was going to be inflicted on him, but
the good thing about Holloway is he seems to have this ability to turn on when he needs to, and when he takes a step back, he'll take a step back. He has that ability to kind of sense when the other guy's fading and when he needs to pour it on.
I think he reads fighters very well, because if you look at a lot of the time, Max's weakest round is always the first.
He's feeling them in out, isn't he? Yeah.
I mean, Frankie Edgar took the first round against him.
Yeah.
But then Max just realised, okay, this is what he does.
But his cardio is that impressive. He knows he can give up the first round and still comfortably take clean sweep on the judge's decision.
I think he's grown a lot as a fighter.
Yes. Because people forget that he was in the UFC when he was, 21, 22 years old?
Dustin Poirier, first one finished.
Dustin Poirier in his debut. He'd only had 4 fights before then as well.
I think Max Holloway had a good run. And then McGregor came around, and everyone was kind of thinking, how is Holloway not getting... He's not even been spoken about kind of getting a title shot. And McGregor, after like a couple of fights, people were saying, oh, he's going to get a title shot, he's going to get a title shot. I think he's been around and he did get those wins. I think he's a worthy champion.
And I'd argue as well, Holloway's portfolio is better than McGregor's in terms of people he's beaten.
And he's a likeable guy, I like Max.
Yes.
He's really good.
The one worry I always have when it comes to Max though, and I think this is about a lot of fighters who have a lot of fights very young, when is his chin going to crack? Because we saw this with Renan Barão. Renan Barão was 27, 28 when he was winning 32 fights in a row. Dillashaw cracks him and he was never the same fighter.
I think with Max as well, he's got a lot of, rounds up miles on his body.
Yes.
Does a lot of rounds, doesn't need to be fair to him as well. But he's in excellent shape. I suppose that's the only thing that can prolong that chin is cardio, isn't it? And cardio.
And I think if there were any questions about his chin, they were answered in the Dustin Poirier fight. He took some big shots. And a lot of people think he still maybe won the fight. I know a lot of people that said that Holloway could have maybe stole it 3-2. I wasn't one of those people, but... It
would have been interesting if he'd won that fight, because where do you take him from there if he'd won that?
Well, he would have fought Khabib.
Yeah.
And that would have been a massacre.
Yeah. It would have been, I agree.
We'll talk about his opponent though, Alex Volkanovski, 20-1. Last win was Jose Aldo. He's actually beaten 2 former title contenders in a row, Chad Mendes and then Aldo. 17 fight winning streak, so he lost his 4th fight and he hasn't been stopped since. We're talking about a real contender here. And I think as well, we sort of touched on it a while back when we did one of the preview shows. Australian MMA and city kickboxing are really coming into their own recently. It's one of the top training camps right now. Yeah.
It's good to see, I think. And I like to see other kind of regions opening up. Because I feel like you also have, throughout the time of me watching UFC, it seems like you've almost had different regions dominating at different times. I'm not saying this is going to be I think the same way, but
it's better for the sport as well when you have people from different nations coming to the fore. I mean, obviously, if you've got like for a long time, Australian MMA was just Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt was the only guy. But when you've got someone like Volkanovski and then Adesanya as well, it helps those 2 regions. And then on the other hand, you look at China with Zhang Weili, and then you look at the Mexican fighters coming through. It's great to see it as a global sport. If you have a big name from your nation up at the top, it does wonders for...
The next fight you talk about African MMA, aren't we?
Yeah.
Things like, obviously I know he's from Aussie, but we've got obviously the middleweight champion from Nigeria
originally,
So there is, like you said, it's more depth, isn't it, which is only a good thing.
Yeah, I think the UFC will always want to tap into a new region. They'll always want to spread that kind of the marketability.
What would you say are Volkanovski's biggest strengths, Gareth?
I don't think his pressure and wrestling. I don't think Max Holloway ever, as good as his resume is, I don't think he's ever fought anyone in terms of the grappling credentials that he brings to the party.
I mean, Frankie Edgar had them, but Frankie Edgar is tiny compared to Max Holloway.
Powerful. Think Chad Mendes, Russian. I know we said it before. Russian Chad Mendes, isn't he? Yeah. Big, powerful. I mean, and he's obviously beat Chad Mendes. So
I always loved watching the Mendes fight at 232 because you know on Mortal Kombat where you choose the same character and one of them's like a palace swap with the other. It was like that. They just exactly the same build, exactly the same fighting style. That was the fight that made me wake up about Volkanovski. That's when I thought this guy could be a serious contender. Yeah. I mean, I'd always heard the buzz around him. I saw him like demolish Darren Elkins. But that was the first time I really started to believe the hype.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what would have been, for me, quite interesting is if Robert Whittaker was still champion and Volkanovski as champion. Suddenly you've got 2 kind of Australian guys in there. That's got to be...
That'd be massive.
That is crazy for me. You go back 10 years and think, there'll be 2 Australians as champions. That is...
Because what? Like, if you ignored Mark Hunt, who was the next big Australian fighter? Soteropoulos?
Kyle Noak. From Kyle Noak.
Kyle Noak?
Well, I wouldn't say big, but yeah.
Was Soteropoulos Australian?
What's that?
Was he Greek Australian?
Greek Australian.
Soteropoulos,
I'm not saying he was fantastic, but he was probably one of the only ones I remember being Australian.
Do you remember Beck Rawlins?
Yes.
I do, yeah. Because she does bare knuckle boxing. Has she done bare knuckle
She's done bare knuckle, yeah.
I think she's still fighting on this, isn't she?
I think she's done a few fights with Bellator.
Yeah.
I love how we started talking about Beck Rawlins for no reason on the show.
Yeah, I think that the point of that is just that Australian MMA has come on quite a lot.
It's come up a long way.
Yeah.
When it comes to Volkanovski as well, I think the big question from Volkanovski's perspective, he does have a lot of power. He does have the wrestling to cause Max problems. How good's his cardio?
Has he fought 5 rounds before?
He's never fought 5 rounds, at least not in the UFC.
Right, so that's obviously a question mark over his cardio, especially when you're talking to Max Holloway, we've already discussed the cardio master when it comes to that kind of weight division.
I think being someone who's been there and done 5 rounds before, I think that's an advantage as well. Sometimes I think for your first kind of main event being, or a title fight and it being that 5 rounds, that can kind of overwhelm you. I don't know if you can, it's different from training. Can you pace yourself? Do you know how to pace yourself as the fight goes on, as Max maybe steps it up a bit? It's a learning process, I think.
And I think this may be one of the benefits of this fight being a co-main, because I think with a main event you would be feeling the pressure
more
of that status, and that could affect how people perform. So I think maybe being the co-main and having a bigger fight taking that shadow off means that Volkanovski's not going to be feeling that pressure as much.
Yeah, I know you say that, right? But I honestly think, because for him this is his main event.
Yes.
I don't think that's going to change too much. I think he's going to go into it for him like it's a main event, like it's 5 rounds. It is a title fight for him. It's a main event. I don't know if it'll take too much away from it. I think the pressure will still be the same for him.
For me, this fight is going to rest on the first 2 rounds. I think Volkanovski is going to start very strongly. If he is able to get a few takedowns, maybe wear Max down a bit, he could do enough to survive when he gets to rounds 4 and 5, when Max is expected to come into his own.
Yeah.
If Max does well in those first 2 rounds, I see it being one-way traffic.
It's like you say, if Volkanovski goes hard those first 2 rounds, it might be to his detriment. He might then
I know he's
gas him out.
He's 20-1. What was his loss? Was it by knockout or was it by decision? Or?
I think it was a decision, but don't take that as gospel.
I'm just curious on how, obviously, extremely durable, but does Max Holloway have the volume striking enough to finish him on his feet?
I think Volkanovski's durable enough that I don't think Max is going to finish him. The question is, can Volkanovski finish Max? Because Volkanovski does have power. We've seen him stop people before. Yeah,
I don't want to think of. I can't really think of Max Holloway getting put away in this fight. I think he's going to want to put on a performance. I think he's going to want that kind of Brian Ortega performance of this. But it's another fighter in that kind of realms of, for me, Brian Ortega, where in my head I think this is the guy who could do it. I think I'll stick with Max with this.
I'm going to say Max with decision.
Stick with it,
yeah, decision.
Decision for you, Max?
Yeah, but just because of the cardio in the 5 rounds, it being 5 rounds, he does. Yeah, I think I'll stick. But I think Volkanovski will put on a, like you say. I agree with the first 2 rounds. He's going to step
critical.
Normally, I play quite safe when it comes to my predictions. Volkanovski. There's just I think he's going to get him in those first 2 rounds.
Finish.
I think there's just something about. I think it's his build, his physique. He's probably the best all-rounder that Max has faced. And again, you've always got to be wary of Max's chin. I think it is going to crack at some point, and I think somebody who has the power like Volkanovski does could potentially do that.
I think Volkanovski's coming in there hungry as well.
Yeah.
He wants it.
He's got more chance than Brian Ortega, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Same.
He's got more tools to win.
Yes.
Yeah.